Interlingual subtitling with and without an interpreter. A respeaker's perspective by Dorrestein from Subtext Language and Media. Evan is seated behind a desk, wearing a cut-and face mask and a steno mask.
Hello and welcome to the 7th live Subtitling and Accessibility Symposium, completely COVID-proof, hopefully. I am here with my face mask and my steno mask, just to be sure, and I hope to give an interesting talk. Just a minute.
He takes off his face mask.
First, let's take a brief look at some interlingual subtitling. What is it? And Wi-Fi solutions should be better than the ones that we have now, full stop. And the next step, comma, we hope to make the next step next year, full stop. It never ends, full stop. Dash, we don't have like an end game on Wi-Fi, full stop. But people, comma, they want guaranteed Wi-Fi and they don't need a booster, full stop. No, comma, if you have a functional product, comma, you don't need anything else, full stop. Dash, we have a very funny question, full stop.
Back to Evan's office.
Right, so my name is Evan Dorrestein. I've been a respeaker since 2002, and I've been a translator since 2006, when I started out as a freelancer, and I started with my own company, Subtext Language and Media. And I've been an interlingual respeaker since a year and a half, 2 years, and I will be talking to you about that. So the questions that I will try to answer today: what is the view of the respeaker when it comes to the skill of interlingual respeaking? Can it be done on a high level that can compete with trained interpreters? Or are there limits to what respeakers are capable of? Is it a question of training respeakers? What about the workload in a real-time setting if you want to provide interpreting and speech-to-text reporting at the same time? And finally, what are the pros and the cons for the client? Now, in the past weeks, I have experienced different settings for several clients, and I will try to illustrate my views with examples from the field. So on to the first question: what is the view of the respeaker when it comes to the skill of interlingual respeaking? Well, as a respeaker, I felt most comfortable respeaking in Dutch, my mother tongue. And when I first started respeaking in English, I remember tripping over my tongue at first. My mouth just couldn't keep up with my mind. But after a little practice, now I'm just as comfortable respeaking in English as I am in Dutch. But interpreting is a different discipline altogether. As a subtitler, I'm used to looking for the translation that is exactly right. I can look it up in a dictionary and I have all the time in the world. For interpreting, I needed to step out of this comfortable position, and that's a little bit scary. I translate and I respeak, so interlingual respeaking seems to be the logical next step. I should be able to master this. But it's still daunting for somebody with no formal interpreting training. So at first I was quite hesitant to take the leap. I had worked with such good interpreters that I felt I had imposter syndrome when I started doing it. With a little practice though, some interpreters, they were 9 out of 10. And I felt I started out at 6 out of 10. With a little practice, though, I feel that went up to 7 or 8 out of 10, and I aim to get better. But you need to get out there and do it. Otherwise, it just won't happen. It takes a lot of discipline to practice at home without having an actual interlingual respeaking job to train for. It helps that I have a respeaking colleague, Denise Kruse, who is a trained conference interpreter. When we work together, I have somebody to fall back on should I be struggling. When I first started out, she'd do the first 30-minute shift, and that gave me the chance to listen and to learn and get into it. That's a great confidence booster. And then I'd do the next shift for 15 minutes, and then she would take over again. A few months later, when I interpreted a speaker in Antwerp, I didn't even realize that I was respeaking in a different language. My brain just took over. That was a thrilling experience. So can respeakers with no interpreting background do interlingual? Absolutely. But you need to overcome that mental hurdle of imposter syndrome. With some practice and the support of a colleague, you can grow into it. And that brings me to the next questions. Can it be done on a high level that can compete with trained interpreters? Or are there limits to what respeakers are capable of? Is it a question of just get enough training? To answer this, I'll tell you about a conference I did with Denise, which was all about plants, a very specialist subject. Now, I couldn't pull that off at all with my limited experience. And because this job came up quite late, Denise also wanted to do this intralingually. So we got 2 interpreters there. One of them was very good, and I had worked with her before. And she was so good that she gave me a nasty case of imposter syndrome again. The other interpreter struggled a bit more. That made me feel a bit better about my own interpreting skills. In my view, training respeakers will go a long way, but interpreters do this work on a daily basis. I don't see myself getting to the level of the best interpreters, no matter how much I practice. It's just not my daily work. So when the subject matter is complex, I'd go for interpreters with respeakers. Now, what about the workload? Isn't that too high in a real-time setting to provide interpreting and speech-to-text reporting at the same time? This is a very interesting topic. A few weeks ago, Denise and I were asked to provide live subtitling for a live stream of a university. The Dutch speakers needed to be subtitled in English. We had done this before for this client, where Denise was the interpreter and I did the English respeaking. It was in a bar in the center of Amsterdam, and I was sat in a room that was also the changing room of a famous Dutch TV presenter, Rick van der Westerlaken. And Denise had a place in the kitchen next to the deep fryer. It smelled lovely there. Anyway, this time we thought we'd work together as interlingual respeakers, so we had both prepared for this. But when I came to the venue, there wasn't any room for us to sit together. They assumed we'd use the same setup as in the bar. So in this case, Denise had a table in a room 20 meters away from my room, and there was no way that we could sit next to each other and work as interlingual respeakers. So we changed plans. Denise interpreted from Dutch to English, and I respoke her. And I must say, I was quite relieved to be completely in my comfort zone again. No stress, just English respeaking, no interpreting needed. And Denise said she liked being an interpreter again, just focusing on the translation, although she regularly added period and comma while she was interpreting. So in this setup, the workload was a lot less. The downside was that we were forced to do a session of at least 90 minutes, so we couldn't take turns. But I have a lot less stress respeaking intralingually for 90 minutes than respeaking and interpreting at the same time for 45 minutes. Now, what are the pros and the cons for the client? The client often doesn't really know what the options are. They just ask for live subtitling. They don't know what respeakers are, and they definitely don't know that some of them can interpret too. So they assume that they'd need interpreters and typists to subtitle a live stream. This means 3 or even 4 people for 2 hours of work. Working with interlingual respeakers means you only need 2, so it could be cheaper for the client. And interlingual respeakers can hear the original audio, so they can indicate the speakers in the subtitles. Interlingual respeakers are also used to getting the text on screen as quickly as possible, whereas some interpreters might be a bit loose and wordy, which causes more subtitle delay. Do you get the same quality of translation? Well, that depends on the interpreting skills of the respeakers and interpreters. For the client, working with qualified interpreters gives them assurance of quality. For speech-to-text production, clients often rely on the reputation of subtitling agencies. So respeakers have to earn their trust, so long as there is no certification of respeakers in the Netherlands. To sum up, what is the view of the respeaker when it comes to the skill of interlingual respeaking? Start practicing with interpreting and go out and do it. I was hesitant at first, but I'm convinced it can and should be done. Can we compete with trained interpreters? Yes, but leave the specialized subjects to the specialists. Isn't the workload too high? Well, interpreting and respeaking at the same time isn't for everybody. Intralingual is a lot less stressful. But if your language skills are there and you like a challenge, go out there and take the leap. And for the client, it's a choice between 2 interlingual respeakers with minimal delay, or if the content is complex, 2 specialized interpreters and 1 or 2 speech-to-text reporters. I'll leave you with a final thought. Interpreters have fought hard to get soundproof booths, 45-minute shifts, and good rates. As respeakers, we should be mindful of what they have achieved in terms of working environment. And remember, 2 respeakers instead of 3 or 4 people doing the work means that you can ask for higher rates. I'd love to tell you more about the things that I encountered on my travels as a respeaker, but that is for another time. Thanks very much for your attention.